I was 43 when I learned a very dangerous truth. The people who smile the widest often hide the sharpest knives. And mine? They didn't just stab me. They made sure I watched myself bleed. 22 years. That's how long I was married to him. 22 years of building a life brick by brick. A house filled with memories. A business built from nothing. And a marriage that everyone called perfect. People used to say, "You're so lucky." And I would smile. Because I believed it. My husband, Samir. He wasn't just my partner. He was my safe place. Or at least, that's what I thought. And my sister, Hina, she was my responsibility. After our parents died, I raised her like my own child. Fed her, protected her, loved her. More than myself. If someone had told me back then that these two people would destroy me together, I would have laughed. But betrayal doesn't arrive with warnings. It arrives quietly, disguised as love. It started with something small, a feeling. You know that strange moment when everything looks normal, but something feels wrong. Samir started coming home late. At first it made sense. Work, meetings, deadlines. But then his phone changed. He never left it unattended. Passwords I didn't know. Messages he wouldn't open in front of me. And Hina, she started visiting more often. Too often. At first I was happy. I thought maybe she was lonely. But then I noticed something strange. The way they looked at each other. Not love. Not even affection. Something else. Something hidden. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. The bed beside me was empty. I walked downstairs quietly. And that's when I heard it. Laughter. Soft. Familiar. But wrong. I followed the sound and then I saw them. Sitting close. Too close. Whispering. Smiling. My heart didn't break in that moment. It froze. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew. But I didn't confront them. No. Because anger is loud, but truth is patient. The next morning, I acted normal, made breakfast, smiled, asked about their day, and they smiled back, like nothing had happened. That's when I understood something terrifying. They weren't just betraying me, they were comfortable doing it. And comfort comes from practice. That day, I stopped being a wife, and I became an observer. I started noticing everything, every glance, every message, every lie. Samir's late nights increased. Hina's visits became routine, and slowly, the truth started revealing itself, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't just an affair. It was something much worse. One afternoon, Samir left his laptop open. A mistake. Or maybe a sign. I wasn't planning to check. I really wasn't. But something inside me whispered, "Now." So I did. And what I found didn't just break my heart. It rewrote my entire reality. Documents, contracts, agreements, all signed, all finalized. And my name? Gone. From everything. Our business, our house, our accounts. Everything had been transferred. Not to him, to her. Hina. My hands started shaking. This wasn't betrayal. This was erasure. They weren't just replacing me. They were removing me. Completely. Legally. Financially. Socially. Like I had never existed. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen, trying to understand how the two people I loved most had planned my destruction so perfectly. And the scariest part? This wasn't new. This had been happening for months, maybe years. And I had seen nothing. Or maybe I had chosen not to see. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. Because something inside me changed. Something cold. Something dangerous. For the first time in my life, I stopped reacting, and I started thinking, because if they had spent months, maybe years, planning my downfall, then my response couldn't be emotional. It had to be strategic. That night, as I lay beside him, pretending to sleep, I made a decision. I would let them think they'd already won. And then, I would take everything back. Slowly, silently, completely. Because revenge isn't about pain. It's about precision. And I had just begun. I remember the exact moment I decided I would disappear. Not physically, not completely, but emotionally, mentally, strategically, because the woman they wanted to destroy was no longer me. The next morning, I became someone else, soft, quiet, unaware. I smiled more, asked fewer questions, trusted blindly, or at least pretended to, and they believed it. Of course they did, because people who lie love easy victims, and I became the easiest one. Samir started relaxing again. His guard dropped. Hina laughed more openly, stayed longer, even touched things in my house, like they already belonged to her. And I let her, because every second they felt comfortable, it was another second I got closer to the truth. I started keeping a journal, not emotional thoughts, not pain, evidence, dates, times, behaviors, patterns. Samir's late-night calls always happened between 11:30 and 1 a.m. Hina's visits increased on those same nights. Coincidence? No. Routine. And routine's kinda easy to break. I began recording things, quietly, carefully. A phone left on the table, a conversation captured, a message reflected in a mirror. Tiny pieces. But powerful, because truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to exist. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, their real plan revealed itself. They weren't just taking my place, they were building a future. Without me. Samir had already started introducing Hina as a business partner to others. I watched from a distance, smiling, nodding, playing my role. But inside, I was counting. Every lie, every move, every step closer to my disappearance. Until one evening, everything became clear. I was in the kitchen. Hina was in the living room. Samir had just stepped out. And then, her phone rang. She didn't notice me, but I heard everything. Her voice was different, colder, sharper. "Don't worry," she said. "Everything will be in my name within a month." My breath stopped. A month. That's all I had left. 30 days. Before I became nothing. And in that moment, something shifted inside me again. Time. Time was no longer my advantage. It was my enemy. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned, not emotionally, not impulsively, strategically. If they were rushing, it meant something was coming, something big, and I needed to find it. Fast. The next few days, I watched even more closely. Samir became more distracted, more careless, and then he made the mistake that changed everything. He left a file open, not on his laptop, on the dining table, printed, careless. Or maybe he thought I was too blind to notice. I waited. Hours passed, and when the house was silent, I opened it, and what I saw made everything make sense. A final transfer agreement. Date, 14 days from now. 14 days. Until I lost everything. Legally, irreversibly. I closed the file slowly, and for the first time, I smiled, not because I was happy, but because now I had a deadline. And deadlines create clarity. That night, I stopped being reactive, and I became dangerous. I opened a new bank account, not in my name. I contacted an old client, someone who trusted me, someone who owed me, And I asked for one thing: discretion. Within days, I had access to resources they didn't know existed: money, connections, information, and most importantly, a way out. But leaving wasn't enough. No. Because if I left quietly, they would win, and I wasn't going to let that happen, so I created something else, a version of myself they would never suspect. I started acting weaker, tired, distracted, forgetful. I even made small mistakes in the business, just enough to make them believe I was falling apart. And they believed it. Of course they did, because arrogance blinds people. Sama stopped hiding things. Hina stopped pretending. They even started discussing plans in front of me, as if I was already gone. And I listened. Every word was another weapon. But the real turning point came 3 days before everything was supposed to end. Samir sat across from me, smiling, calm, and he said something I will never forget. "You've changed," he said. I looked at him, softly. "Have I?" I asked. He nodded. "You're quieter." I smiled. "Maybe I'm just tired," I said. He reached for my hand, and for a second, I saw it. Guilt. Real. But it was too late, because guilt doesn't erase betrayal, and in that moment, I knew something for certain. He thought I'd already lost, and that was his final mistake, because the next move was mine. And it would change everything. The last 3 days were the quietest of my life. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything was. Silence has a strange way of hiding storms. On the outside, everything looked normal, almost peaceful, but every heartbeat, every breath, every glance was part of a countdown, a storm I had already predicted and accepted. Samir moved like a man who had already won, confident, relaxed, untouchable. He smiled more, slept better, laughed louder, as if the weight of his deceit had been lifted. Watching him like that, I felt nothing. Or maybe everything. Fascination, sorrow, rage, all tangled into a quiet, dangerous calm. Hina, though, was different. She watched me, carefully, not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to feel it. Maybe somewhere deep inside. She knew, but suspicion without proof is powerless, and I made sure she had none. On the outside, I was still the same woman, soft, gentle, broken. I moved slowly, spoke softly, avoided eye contact just enough to look defeated, but inside, everything had already changed. 22 years of my life, gone in pieces. 22 years of laughter, dreams, promises, all built on sand. I remember the early days, the way he smiled when I first met him, the charm, the confidence. I was naive. I was loyal. I was blind. And I gave everything. Every sacrifice, every dream, poured into a life I thought was shared. But betrayal doesn't announce itself. It creeps, it whispers, it poisons quietly. Hina wasn't always there. She came later, like a shadow in my marriage, soft at first, almost invisible, but gradually undeniable. The first time I saw them together, my heart twisted in ways I couldn't name. I wanted to run. I wanted to confront them. But the careful, calculating part of me stayed silent. Because rage without a plan is just self-destruction. The night before the transfer, I packed. Not everything, just what mattered: documents, evidence, memories I refused to leave behind. I stood in that house one last time, 22 years of my life, and yet it no longer felt like mine. Walls that once sheltered me now felt like cages. Rooms filled with echoes of laughter, arguments, dreams, and lies. I didn't cry. I had already mourned this life weeks ago, before they even knew. I left just before sunrise. No note, no goodbye, because closure is a privilege, and they didn't deserve it. By the time they woke up, I was already gone. But I didn't run. I repositioned. A new city, a new name, a new life. Not fake. Rebuilt. This time, I wasn't starting from zero. I was starting from experience, from knowledge, from truth. And that made me dangerous. Months passed, then a year. Quietly, carefully, I built everything again, stronger than before. But this time I built it on control. Control over my money, my choices, my life. And once I was ready, I began watching them, Samir and Hina, living the life they stole. Or at least, trying to. At first, everything looked perfect. A new house, a new business, a flawless image for the world to admire. But perfection is fragile. And I knew exactly where to apply pressure. A deal that didn't go through, a partner who suddenly backed out, a contract that mysteriously failed. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just enough to create cracks. Cracks spread, slowly, relentlessly. Stress replaced confidence, arguments replaced smiles, trust began breaking, exactly the way mine once did. Every day I reminded myself, patience is power, patience and silence. I walked among them like a ghost, invisible, but always observing. Every gesture, every whisper, every fleeting glance, catalogued in my mind. I replayed the past, the betrayals, the lost dreams, and I stored them all for the perfect moment. The perfect moment would come. Hints of future revenge. I began planning the moment when the world would see the truth. Every message, every photo, every transfer, every secret, years of evidence, waiting. And I knew the exposure would not only destroy them, it would feel like justice. But for now, I waited, patient, calm, invisible. Then, one evening, a familiar pattern emerged. Samir's arrogance, Hina's careless smile, their world already fraying, and I saw it. The tiniest opportunity, a mistake, a crack. The storm was coming, and I would not be stopped. Because this time, I was not the woman they thought I was. I was the shadow they never noticed, the storm they never anticipated. If you want to see how the storm breaks, and how justice finally unfolds, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The storm I had waited for had arrived. Months of planning, years of patience, every silent step, every shadowed observation, every stolen secret. It all led to this moment. Samir and Hina thought they were untouchable, that the world would always believe their lies, that I would remain invisible. They were wrong. I watched them from afar at first, carefully, like a predator circling its prey. Every mistake they made, every careless word, every false smile, catalogued, stored, waiting. Because revenge is not just an act, it's a performance, a carefully timed revelation. And I had waited 22 years for this. It began subtly. A deal that should have closed, failed. A partner who once promised loyalty, backed out. A contract that seemed secure, evaporated overnight. They didn't notice at first. Small cracks in the foundation of their lives, minor tremors. But cracks always grow, and tremors always shake. Their confidence began to falter. Arguments replaced laughter. The smiles they once wore like armor started to fade. I watched from the shadows, silent, calm, invisible. The world saw them as successful, untouchable. But I saw the truth. And now, it was time to make the world see too. For years I had collected proof. Every message they thought was private. Every transfer, every receipt, every hidden transaction, every betrayal, recorded, documented, ready for the perfect unveiling. I didn't act recklessly. This was not anger. This was precision. I waited for the night when everything would converge, the moment when the world, the audience, the people who admired them, would finally witness the truth. And that night came sooner than I expected. The biggest achievement of their lives. A stage, a spotlight, a room full of people who believed in their story, their success, their integrity. I arrived quietly, in black. Not for mourning, not for guilt, but for power, the kind of power that doesn't scream, but commands attention the moment it enters a room. No one recognized me, except her, Hina. Our eyes met across the room. For a split second, everything we had lived, all the deceit, the betrayal, the silent planning, flashed between us. Her confident smile disappeared. Fear replaced it. She knew. She just didn't know how much, or when. And that was my advantage. The ceremony began. Speeches, applause, carefully curated lies dressed as truth. The audience drank it in like wine, toasting the success of a man they believed untouchable. Samir walked onto the stage, confident, proud, untouchable. He began his speech. Hard work, integrity, trust, loyalty, all words, all false. I almost laughed, but I held myself in check. Patience is a weapon sharper than anger. I moved quietly to the control room. The technician looked puzzled. I handed him the drive. "Play it," I said, and the world shifted. The screen lit up behind Samir. At first, confusion, then realization, then horror, messages, photos, bank transfers, hidden records, the truth, raw, unfiltered, unstoppable. Samir froze mid-sentence. Hina's eyes widened. The audience fell silent. Whispers became murmurs. Murmurs became chaos. The empire they had built, crumbling in real time. Internal reflections, emotional intensity. I stood still, calm, observing, because this wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And I savored every second. Years of betrayal, stolen years, stolen dreams. Finally revealed. For the first time, they understood what it feels like to lose everything, to see carefully constructed lies crumble in front of everyone. Within days, investigations began. Charges were filed. Media exposed the truth. Their reputation destroyed. Their wealth questioned. Their allies distant. And the world saw what I had always known. They weren't untouchable. They were fragile. They were human. And I survived. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Because revenge is never about celebration. It's about closure. And at 43, I finally understood something profound. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. It shows what you are capable of when pushed beyond limits. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can become is the person they never saw coming. If this story shocked you, if the intensity of betrayal and justice left you speechless, subscribe now. There are more stories of courage, revenge, and survival that you won't want to miss. I walked away that night, not as a victim, not as someone broken, but as someone free. The past may have tried to define me, but the future is mine, and in that freedom, I found peace.